While After Effects isn't known for its beautiful 3D rendering capabilities, there are a few tricks that can push the envelope, and we're going to talk about that in this video. Let's jump in by creating a new composition with this button here. I'm just going to call it __MAIN 1920 by 1080. I'll stick with 30 frames per second just to keep render times low, and we'll go with OK. Obviously, the first thing to do is create text. So we click on the type tool, click in here. We can type 3D. Probably want to pick a bold font like this. We can make it bigger. Click the arrow first. We could slide this over, move this. I could drag on the corners, but if you do that, just be careful. Things can get out of hand, so hold on Shift. This is good. I'll go to my align window, set this to composition, and hit the button here to align it horizontally, vertically. To make this layer 3D, we click on this check marks under that cube. I'm going to use a keyboard shortcut that works really well and really fast. I'm going to hold down Option. Actually, I'm not going to release Option, and I'm going to press the 3 different mouse buttons. So if I hold down Option, we'll zoom in a bit here. Hold down Option, click and drag, left click and drag. You'll see we're rotating around in 3D space, which is great. Still holding down Option, middle click and drag. You'll see we pan, right click and drag to the left or right, or I think up and down also works. That'll get us to zoom in and out. And notice that there's a little crosshair when we do all that stuff. So if I hold down Option and left click to rotate around here, I'm going to rotate around that corner. If I hold down Option, left click and drag this part of the D, you'll see I'm rotating around that D. So that makes it really effective for getting the position exactly how you want. Speaking of working in 3D, notice how it's going pretty slowly. So if I click this button here, draft 3D, and then I left click and drag, this is going to work really fast, and I highly recommend working this way until we start lighting and rendering. It's just going to make your life a lot more fun when you could work in real time. Now, just a little bit of housekeeping so that we're all working on the same page. Let's change some settings here, and I'm going to just look at this here. So if yours does not say 32, you could hold down Alt or Option, click on it. If it says 8, click on it again, 16, click on it again, 32. This will give us the highest range of colors to work with. Now, the next thing I want to do is over here, it might say Classic 3D, but switch this to Cinema 4D and also go into the render options. And I've got my quality set to 2. Yours might be 1. 2 will just give you a little bit more quality. Once you go past that, I think you could go as far as like 99, but you're probably not going to really see a difference. The only time you might need to raise this up to a really high value would be if you have blurry reflections. I'm going to keep it 2 because I'm probably not going to have blurry reflections. Let's hit OK there. Now we're ready to start extruding. Okay, so let's expand the options here and find our geometry options, find our extrusion depth, and I'll drag this out. And it's not going to look very good, but I can hold down Option, middle mouse, click here to pan this over, and Option left to rotate, maybe pan this up a little bit more. This looks good as far as in the view, but we can't see any details. So we need a light in the scene. But before I add the light, I want to get out of this draft 3D because I want to see all the full details that are going to show up with lighting and shadows and reflections and things like that. So this will kind of keep that from happening. So you want to make sure that's clicked off now. And I'm just going to right click in an area over here, go to new, go to light. It's going to save all my settings from the last light that I created. These settings are not really that important right now, but if you just want to follow along precisely, these are the settings that I have. Let's go and hit OK. You know what, that looks okay. What I'm going to do is click and drag this over here closer to the text. I'm going to bring this up. And I'm just clicking on the arrows to move in one direction or another because I want this to kind of be focused on the corner of the D. I could zoom out if I can't see the arrow here. Just move this down a bit. We're getting closer. Maybe I'll push it back a little bit more in the Z space. Your lighting is very important. It's probably the most important part of getting your 3D to look good. I think it's okay as it is. I'm going to hold an Option, left click to pan this around again. It is pretty slow. I could always hit draft 3D again. You'll see it is much faster now, but we're not getting the full quality. Let's double click on our light and let's see how these settings work. The intensity, you probably can guess what that's going to do. It's going to make it brighter. That's probably too much. I do want a pretty bright highlight there. But the next thing I want to do is I like to start off with my fall off distance, set that to 0. So fall off distance at 0, there's no softening around the edge of the light. And then I like to take my radius, say, okay, I want the lit area to be around here. And then I can take the fall off distance now that I know precisely where my light is affecting and start to bring this up. This will get me some nice fall off in here. I've got shadows on. I don't really see much in terms of shadow, so we'll try and fix that. Shadow darkness set to 100. Shadow diffusion set to 0. I think that's going to be good. Let's go out here for a second. Could make this a little bit bigger here. Go back, and I'm looking now at material options under my text layer. So material options, just to expand that out. We've got accept shadows on, so it can accept shadows from other objects, but we've got cast shadows off, so it's not going to cast its own shadows. Let's turn this on, and now you can see that this looks a little nicer here. Inside these letters is shadowed as you would expect. I'm going to double click on the light again. Let's take shadow darkness down. Let's set maybe to 50, see how that looks. Maybe that's a little too bright, so I'll try and split the difference, +5. Let's try that. Yeah, and I just hit tab just to accept the value without having to press OK or click on something else here. And that's good. I got a shadow. It's not completely black. I'm pretty happy with that. So I'm going to press OK. Now, what I'm going to do is rename this. Instead of point light 1, I'll call this 1. And then I'm going to duplicate this, and I'm going to call the duplicate 1A. So I just want a little bit more control over this light. To do that, I'm actually going to create a second light. Almost in the same spot. I'll move it a little bit. I'm going to press Command D. And you'll see it's just going to get a lot brighter. Let's move this, say, just back a little bit, maybe left a little bit, maybe up a little bit, if I could grab that. Okay, good. It's in a very similar spot, but this one, I'm going to double click on it. I don't need this to cast shadows, first of all. I'm going to turn off light 1. And as I said, I'm going to click on this one. This will be 1A. This will be kind of my ambient version of light 1. So just select layer, press return to rename it. So now we're only looking at this one light by itself. I'll double click on it. And I want this to be subtle, and I want it to stretch out further. So let's bring the intensity down. And also for some variety, we can give this a slightly different color. Let's say maybe a little bit more red, maybe a little bit less saturated, and something like that. All right, so I'm gonna bring my radius up higher, and I'm gonna increase the fall off distance also. And I want this to just kind of reach the back of the letter. If I can see a hard edge here, I know I've gone too far, and I think I'm starting to see, no, it's pretty, extrudes out pretty far. Okay, we're starting to see, let's just bring this way out. I don't necessarily want to see the back of the letters lit, or if they are, just very slightly lit. So I'll bring this down. And now the back end is just kind of out of the light. And that's what I'm looking for. Nice, subtle. It goes out far. There's no shadow. Might even take the intensity down a little bit because I don't want this to be too intense. We already have a light in the scene. Let's show that previous light. So we got this one light. Now it's getting really bright. And we got this one here. I'm going to go into the original, double click on it. Let's bring this down just a bit, so we're not getting that overexposed bright. Look at the corner, and I think I'm okay with that amount of brightness. And that's our basic setup for the first light, and we'll just repeat that a few more times. Before I add more lights, I want to give a little bit of a bevel here. So if I look at bevel style, I see it's set to none. I'm going to set that to either angular or convex. I'm going to try convex. You'll see maybe a tiny bit of a bevel. Let's set this up something higher, like 10. See what we got now. And then maybe that's okay. Maybe it's a little too much. I think I could go with probably 7. I want a bevel, but I don't want it to be too obvious because I'm going to add a second kind of bevel in here later on. I think that is good. Now we can find our light, or our 2 lights here. I'll select both of them, click one, shift click the other, press Command D to duplicate them. And then we have these lights kind of staggered. So I'm going to click this one here and drag it up. And now they're both next to each other. And I'm also going to click this one, press return. I'm going to name this 2A. So we got 1 and 1A, we got 2 and 2A. Let's select our number 2s. They're both selected. I'll click the arrow for one of them and just start moving this over here, and I'll let go. and I'll wait for it to catch up. Now we are viewing things at the high quality, so it's going to go a little bit slower. So if you want, what you could do is like we did before, click on Draft 3D. And now we can move and just kind of get a feel for things, even if we're not seeing the full quality. I can get a feel for how I want this to look. And then check this back off and see how that's working. I think what I'm going to do is just focus one light at a time like I did before. So I'm going to turn off 2A, select this one, get it kind of like it is here, focusing and highlighting that corner. I can see the front is brighter than the back side, so I'm going to keep clicking on that Z arrow and trying to move it back a little bit. And yeah, it's getting pretty close here. I'm going to just nudge it back a bit, maybe to the left a little bit here. I'd like to see some more lighting on this left face. It's over a bit here, so hopefully we'll see a little bit more. And yeah, I think that should do it. All right, so yeah, that's nice. I like that corner there. Now I'm going to go in and double click this light. It might be going back a little too far, or it might be a little too intense. I'm going to take the intensity down a bit. We see like a nice light kind of falling off, going back against that edge and down here. That's working pretty well for me. I also have the option to adjust my radius and my fall off. I'm going to make this a little bit smaller, the radius, so it has a little bit less coverage. Okay, so I like that. It's not brightening up the back too much. I'm not in love with the shadow here, so I'm going to take the shadow diffusion here. I'm either going to just turn the shadow off or make the shadows lighter. Let's see what happens when we just turn the shadows off. Are they really that important for this light? You know what? I don't think I really need these shadows, so I'm going to just leave those off. I think this looks better without them. That is good. I'll hit OK. Now I'll turn on our kind of ambient version of this light, see how that looks. Let's move this. Maybe I'll move it up a bit. And sometimes you'll see as I'm moving this, it's really hard to know what it's doing. So in those instances, what I like to do is double click on the light and just give it a ridiculous color, something that is nothing related to anything we have in here, like a really saturated blue. I'll bring the intensity way up. Gotta hit OK, and then I can bring the intensity way up here. And this will give me a little bit of a better feel for, you know, the areas that this light is affecting. Mostly the front here, since I moved it. You know what, I'll say OK for now, and then I'll just kind of move this in place. Yeah, I like this here. It's affecting this back wall a little bit. Maybe I'll move it over to the left, the back side of the D. I'd like it if it's hitting this side of the 3 a little bit too. I like that. Now this is way extreme and the colors are definitely wrong. I know where this light is affecting, and now I'm going to double click on it. I'm going to make it, you know what, maybe I'll make it even like a little bit more red, just to have some variety. That red will help the gold look, but obviously this is way too bright and I think it's going too far. But first I'll take the brightness down, get something a little bit more subtle. Okay, that's good. I can take the radius down. Yeah, that works. Let's see a before and after. Before it was like this, after it's like that. These edges here going back in space, they do not have a bevel on it. And I'm going to right click on this and I'm going to go to create, and I'm going to say create shapes from text. And we'll basically have a copy of our text as a shape layer, and then our original text will be hidden, and I will delete it. Now in here, what I want to do is expand this out, and then you can see we've got this add little icon, and I'm going to click that. I want to add an offset paths. When I do that, you'll see it kind of puffs the text out a little bit bigger. We can do a before and after, and you can see, yeah, that's what it does. So that's great, but let's open this up, find our settings here where it says miter join. I'm going to set that to round. And now you can see it is rounding it off. It's a bit big. Let's set this down to, I don't know, 4. See how that looks. Maybe even drop this down to 2. I don't want this necessarily to be like really rounded. We could turn it on and off and just see. Yeah, it's not a huge difference. It's really subtle, but if you look at this line, you see that it's curved now. And when I turn this off, it's just a sharp kind of computer generated look. I think that is definitely helping, or maybe even 1 could work for this setting. I'm good with that. Let's collapse some of the stuff up here, and I'm going to select 2 and 2A, Command D, and then click and drag this bottom one up so they're both next to each other, and then click on my red arrow, bring this over. Again, let's turn on Draft 3D, speed up this process a bit of lining things up. So this one, I don't know if I might want to bring it down a little bit. Let me zoom out with the scroll wheel. Not zooming out, but just making my composition 50% zoom there. And okay, so we just gotta kind of get this somewhat in the right spot here. Something that looks good. Take a closer look. I will turn off Draft 3D. Yeah, it looks all right. I think maybe we're getting too much, just in comparison on the left side, we're getting a little too much light, but I might want to bring this a bit closer. If that's good, I'll try and push it a little bit further. I'm liking the way the text looks. I will go back in here, and I think I'm going to take my number 2, double click on it. Let's set the intensity down. Might even need to reduce the intensity on this one, but I think that's a little bit better. You could always do a before and after by clicking this, and you could see I am losing a little bit of the light back here. So maybe what I'll do is leave that as it is, and then I'll take this. If I could find the Z, it'll be great. And I can click on this and just bring it back a little bit. We're getting a little bit less light, hopefully on the front face, and a little bit more on the side here. And that's kind of what I'm looking for. Okay, I think that's good. I might need to click on number 1, light, maybe move it up a little bit. And I also might need to reduce its intensity. So as you start to add lights, they all kind of make each other a little bit brighter here and there. You have to kind of come in and finesse things. So let's take this down a bit, see if we could still get a decent result. That is looking pretty good. I'll hit OK. So let me just select this, press return. We'll name this a little bit better. This should be 3A. And while we're here, this is 3A. This is the one without a shadow. So I'm going to duplicate this, and I'll just call this 4. Number 4 will be part of our rim lighting. Drag this over here. Now I don't see very much. So what I'm going to do is, well, let me just option left click to make sure this is in the right spot. And again, it's going slow. So let's click on Draft 3D. I could bring this down and back and get it fairly close to where it needs to be. Right before it starts to shine its light on the front of that surface, probably about where I want it to be. I think that will work. Let's click off of Draft 3D. We could turn this light off, and we could see it is kind of lighting the inside here. That is not what I would like. So I'm going to double click this, and I'm going to turn shadows on and say, well, let's try 100, see how that looks. We can see we're getting nice rim lighting here, and we're not affecting this inside of the letter. Yeah, it's going to be a little bit slower now, but I just want to shift this around. This is kind of nice. We got a little bit of a light here. We got a little bit of a rim light going back in space and over here. The next thing I would do is just kind of control some of the settings here. Like for instance, the radius and the fall off distance. And I'm not completely sure what I want. So I'm going to set the fall off distance, start off at 0 and just see what that looks like. And you can get the picture here. Double click on this again and start bringing the radius up further. And I want to see just how far will this kind of branch out. At this point, the light is affecting the front face up to this point, but the rim light isn't reaching really any further than here and here. I could drag the light down. I'm gonna have to close that window first. I could drag the light down a little bit here, and it should reach out a little bit further. Maybe I could get it kind of, all right, so yeah, you can see I brought it down a little bit more, but I don't really like that result, so I'm gonna undo. I think it looks good. I like how it kind of ends there. I'll double click here again. So it's just a back and forth. Maybe we do want this kind of sharp edge here. I'm gonna add reflections later. I can kind of smooth that out by taking my fall off distance. Yeah, so that makes it really kind of blending in nicely. Bring up the intensity. I think that's pretty good. I'll see if I could even go higher. And yeah, that's too much. So let's go back. Hopefully this works. Go out of there. So we've got one. Probably could get another one. Let's take number 4, Command D, and then bring this over. It looks kind of good, but I don't like how it's blending in over here. So I think I might need to bring this over more. I also don't like the light that it's casting on this front face. I'm going to bring it back a bit. It's kind of blending into the rim lighting down here, but I think I could do a little bit better. I'm going to bring it up. You can see this is just a process, making small fine-tuned adjustments, and sometimes you mess up and it gets worse, so you just undo. And yeah, I think it's better like that. Let me try bringing it down, see how that works. I'm not going to worry too much more about it. I think that's good. Select this, Command D, and drag it over here. We're going to see this face very clearly, so we got to be careful. I'm going to bring this over and maybe back a little bit, just kind of guessing here. I am starting to see a little bit of that light. Bring it just a bit over. Okay, that looks good. There's no rhyme or reason why I'm making these adjustments. I kind of just go in one direction that feels okay. I keep going in that direction. If it works, it works. And I think this is good here. We got the lighting up top. We got a decent rim lighting. We don't have depth of field when we're working with the Cinema 4D renderer. Now, the classic 3D render has depth of field built in the camera. It'll work if we change the settings, but I don't want a flat 3D shape when I could have a nice extruded 3D shape. And in the next video that I post on YouTube, I'm going to talk about how you could actually get a real depth of field effect with the Cinema 4D render, and that's going to be loads of fun.